Hello there, and welcome to the English Language Club, and for our weekly hangout. I am Colin Munro, and this is Tony Culper. How are you doing, Tony?
It's great to be here.
Great, and we've got a few people with us, a few regulars, I think, and some new people too. We've got Lolly Lolly. Who else do we have? I'm going to pronounce that Raw Aravind. I think we've seen you here before. Hello, Raw. Now, Lan Li says, "What are we doing? What we do?" Well, I was thinking, we're writing our course, the Inside English course, and there are sort of three main tips that we are giving in that course, which we think are really important to understand how English actually works. So we're going to talk a little bit about those tips later on. But we were thinking, so while we get started, if you've got any tips, or there must be some tips that you've had in your language learning experience that have helped you to learn English. So why don't you share with us in the chat what those things are? What have been the most helpful things for you? So if you could write that in the chat, that would be really awesome, and we can talk about that, and we'll also talk about these three things that we've got.
Yes.
So let's see. Gasper's here. Hello, Gasper. How are you doing? Gasper's one of our members. Let's see. And yeah, of course, any other questions as well. That's what these sessions are all about. If you've got any question whatsoever, we're here to answer you. So somebody's Barath is asking, what is fluency according to you? Tony, do you want to talk about that?
Well, so fluency is something that's more than really just your language skills, more than really just what your vocabulary is. It's really about how smoothly you can communicate, right? So it's a lot of things that have to do with experience, and there isn't really a specific line that you cross and bam, now you're fluent, right?
No.
It really references how confident you are in communicating with someone in that language, right?
Yeah, I know that when I through sort of teaching and training for teaching, they talk about it, when you're planning a lesson, you're either focusing on, or different parts of a lesson or different lessons might focus on either fluency or accuracy. So you may be doing a certain exercise which is more conversational, in which you'll be focusing on fluency. And if you're doing that, then you won't sort of stop the student every time they make a little mistake. You accept those mistakes and you allow them to just express themselves. So fluency is about expressing yourself, but not necessarily about being accurate and not making any mistakes. So in other types of exercises, perfect. Yeah. So fluency, it's communicating effectively, although not necessarily accurately. Well, I mean,
so it's
I mean, in terms of fluency, not making mistakes, you can make mistakes but still get your message across. That's fluency.
Yes. So fluency is like useful for you. You can get what you need. You can communicate. You can talk to people. You can get your questions answered. All of that. Whereas, for instance, just because you're fluent doesn't mean you can translate for somebody. Because if you can't, catch all those things and be confident you're not making mistakes, you won't necessarily be someone, who could get a job translating, for instance. But fluency is about whether you can function, basically, and whether you feel confident enough to be able to communicate, converse, answer questions, so on.
Yeah. Samaran says, I'm also here. Hello, Samaran. How are you doing?
I think we have some new people here as well.
Yeah, it's great.
So
now,
excited to have everybody.
So, Raw Aravind says, Sir, if you don't mind, I have a doubt. Go for it. Let us know what your question is, what your doubt is. I think you just
Aravind just asked their question. It said, Sir, I am a beginner of learning IPA. and I have completed vowels. When I am practicing vowels and my vocal cords, it's painful. Is there any solution for that? So you're having pain from practicing the sounds?
Yeah, well, this ties in really nicely. What we always say about pronunciation is that it's physical. It's a physical thing. You know, producing the sounds correctly. You know, the way we make sounds is physical. So we need to think about what's the shape of our lips, what's the position of our tongue, what are our teeth doing, and what are our vocal cords doing. And a lot of the time when people struggle with pronunciation, it's because in their own language they're not accustomed to making those sounds. And when I say making those sounds, I mean physically doing certain things with their mouth. So if you're because it's a physical exercise, it's like going to the gym. You know, when you go to the gym the next day, or it aches, it hurts. So I would say if your mouth is hurting, then it's probably a good thing, because it means that the certain shapes and movements that you weren't accustomed to doing, you have now exercised in a way that you will become more accustomed to doing those, to using your mouth in that way. So I'd say that pain is a good thing. It shows that you're developing new skills, hopefully. Let us know if that is helpful. But you're saying specifically your vocal cords.
You do want to be careful. You can hurt your vocal cords by, for instance, yelling. Like people who are in rock bands sometimes hurt their vocal cords. And that's not good. You don't want to damage your vocal cords. So do be careful with that. But your vocal cords shouldn't be doing too much of this. Like in most of the phonemes that we're using in English, the only role your vocal cords really have is either they're on or off. Right, so the difference between, say, a b and a p is the only difference isn't for a b, my vocal cords are on; they're making that b sound, whereas for a p, my vocal cords are off. So you shouldn't be straining your vocal cords necessarily in making these sounds. So you might be either the volume might be too much, or I'm not sure. Shouldn't really be straining your vocal cords the way you might if you're practicing singing or something like that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the only thing I can really think of that it might, the only way you should be straining or causing pain from learning English is if you are forcing yourself to make those sounds and use your mouth in a way that you're not accustomed to. And that's a good thing, because you need to get accustomed to it. So yeah. Now we Lan Lee said, should we focus on accuracy or fluency? For which one first in learning English? I mean, I think you need to. They're two sides of the same coin. You need to focus on both.
There is no first. You can't really do. I mean, until you have a certain amount of accuracy, you can't be fluent. Until you're using the right word, at least, say 50% of the time, you can't be communicating, right?
Yeah.
So there is no first. These are, the more you practice your accuracy, then the more your fluency can come up. Then the higher your fluency is, the more you can improve your accuracy.
Yeah.
So two sides of the same coin. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're tightly bound.
Yeah. And then Lat asked another question, which ties in quite nicely. So, what is proficiency?
So, proficiency is a little bit more of a technical term, and again, there is no one level of proficiency. Proficiency comes in levels. Your proficiency is kind of at what level you can operate. So, you might have a proficiency that's good enough to, be a tourist and ask for directions. Or your proficiency might be enough that you could go grocery shopping or ask for help with getting your car repaired. Or your proficiency might be high enough to be to go to school in that language, or to teach in that language, or eventually the highest proficiency is to be able to be a translator. So proficiency has lots of different levels. and there's hallmarks kind of each level.
Yeah. So, I mean, proficiency really what it means is your level, your level of English. But it is sometimes used, if you do the Cambridge exams, the highest level is the CPE, which is the Cambridge Proficiency in English. So, I guess it is sometimes used to mean the highest level.
Sometimes, yes.
But that's really like proficient. So proficiency is what's the difference between proficient and proficiency? So proficient is the adjective, and proficiency is the noun. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing is a proficiency, and they talk about this in as well. You can use this term with a fluency. A fluency or a proficiency is a specific thing that you're capable of doing. So you might have, a fluency might be speaking using engineering terminology or medical terminology. Like within English, you're particularly fluent at that. That could also be a proficiency, that you have. So again, like it means a little bit different things in context. I think especially the word proficiency means a lot of different things in different contexts.
Yeah. So we've had a few tips coming in, which is good.
Tips.
I think so thank you very much for those. We will come back to those, definitely. We've had one from Pablo. I think Lolly's given us a couple as well. So that's great. We're definitely going to come back to those. But we've had so keep them coming in as well. So if you've just joined us, if you've got, we were at the beginning of the class, I asked, what are the main tips that you found helpful for learning English, or do you have any tips that you'd like to share with us and the rest of the class? So Sumaran says, what's the difference between intonation, pronunciation, and accent? I mix these three things as well as IPA. I would be glad if you can clarify my confusion. So, intonation, pronunciation. So
the first thing to do would be to talk about accent as being its own separate thing, because accent includes all of these other things like stress and intonation and pronunciation, but it also includes things like idioms. So accents are kind of the sort of unique twist on how things are said based on where you're from or where you learned English or where you live. So accent can include all these things, but there's no such thing as wrong accent or a proper accent. Accent is just different for different people. There are some accents people like better, but accents include all of these different things, and there isn't a right wrong, with accents.
Yeah.
So within, the way we say things, off the top of my head, I can think of three main categories for how we say words, which is intonation, stress, and accent. Stress is, I think, very important because the stress of different words depends. So, like, which syllable you place the most emphasis on, and this can change what a word means. So, for instance, the word import is a verb, it means to bring things into the country. Maybe that's not a good example. Imports.
Produce and produce.
Produce is the good example. To produce something is to make it. To produce it, whereas produce is what has been made, and usually in English we talk about produce meaning like fruits and vegetables from a farm, right? So that the stress produce or produce changes what word we're talking about, really. So that one's important. Pronunciation is one we've talked about a lot. It's like how you make the sounds that are involved. So how you pronounce each sound and how you pronounce combinations of sounds. So for instance, you might know how to pronounce an I, a short I, an I, and you might know how to pronounce an R, but that's not the same way as you pronounce an I and R together in the word like bird, especially in British English. Like the I and the R, there's not really the same sound at all. You get that sort of the glottal sound, right?
So I'd say pronunciation is more sort of the science of speech, in some ways. Although phonetics really is more the science. But yeah, pronunciation is making sounds, and
Yes.
trying to make the sounds correctly. But intonation is more like enhancing your communication through the way through the way you're speaking. So, for example, I've been reading through some of the scripts out loud that we've been working on recently, and the intonation is really, really important, because if I just say things, when I just read it I'm not familiar with the text beforehand, I don't know in advance what I'm saying, I can't emphasize the right bits, put in pauses, say some things longer, some things louder, some things quieter. All that, I would say, comes under intonation. So it's another level of communication to make things clear. Like, I'll give you another example. If I just speak like this and keep it very flat and don't try to express anything through my tone, that's not using intonation. Whereas if I stop and put pauses and speak more like this, then I'm using intonation to enhance my communication. So that's what I would say is communication.
Intonation is like the body language of just speech, right? It's all of the gestures and facial expressions. It's all the things that add kind of life to how you're saying, as opposed to just the pure words that are in there.
But it's not. That's not to say that the intonation doesn't come across in just audio. It absolutely does.
No. I mean, it's like body language in terms of it's all the extra communication that we use all the time, but isn't part of just the words themselves. It's part of how we say it. So, the difference between saying, that was amazing, and that was amazing. Like, the words didn't convey what the meaning there was without the intonation. The intonation and the way you said it makes a huge difference, right? It's in the audio as opposed to body language, which you have to see. But it fills out the meaning and makes it richer and more expansive than just like reading the words on a page would. So that's a very interesting question.
Yeah. So Susanta's got a few questions on grammar here. So can I say, I was raining since morning? I think you mean it was raining since morning in the past continuous. So you could say it. You can't say I was raining. You could say it was raining. It was raining since this morning. Or no, you can't really say that, can you? You can say it has
because
been.
You're talking about now.
Yeah.
See, this is the key. This is a key idea here. You're talking about now. You're saying like it's been raining since morning, so you use the perfect because you're talking about now.
Yeah.
But you're talking about an action that's in the past, so you use the present perfect.
Yeah.
It has been raining since morning is what you would say there.
Yeah. So when you use the word since, then you're saying still now it's raining. So you need to use a present tense. So you use the present perfect, which would be it has been raining. Whereas what you say, it was raining, that's a past tense, past simple. Past continuous. In which case that is finished now.
Right.
So
you could say, something like it was raining all morning. So what you're saying is it's not morning anymore, but all morning it was raining. Right? That would be a good use for the past continuous. But if your time includes now or up till now, then you're using a present tense, just like you said. Yeah, exactly. So this is one of those key ideas that really, to us, unlocks the perfect and like why we use the perfect.
Yeah.
Because you might read in a book, when you're using since, you use the perfect. Well, but why? Because since means until now, right? Which means you're talking about now, so you have to use a present tense for that. Just makes it all click.
Yeah, I mean the present perfect is confusing because really we're talking about things in the past. But that's different because it's present perfect continuous. So it's it has been raining. So both has and been are both auxiliary verbs. Has is because it's perfect, and been because it's continuous, and then the main verb is in the ing form. And yeah, this is all stuff that we're talking about in the Inside English course. How when you have more than one auxiliary verb, they sort of one affects the form of the next, and it is all it's complicated, and people find it very difficult. But there is a logic and there is a sense to it. It does make sense when you understand it.
Yes.
And yeah, when we talk about the three tips, which are the three core ideas in Inside English, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But yeah, this is a great question. So the next one says, what does "I have lived here since 2003" mean? Okay, so this is present perfect tense.
Yeah.
I have lived. So that means that in 2003.
So we're talking about the present, right? We're talking about the present, but the action of living is all in the past, right? So we use the present perfect.
Yeah. So you're saying that the present perfect is when you're talking about now, but you're talking about an experience or something from the past that is affecting now. So you're saying that you have you currently now, because it's present, you have the experience or the memory of living there since 2003. So I mean, it means that you moved there in 2003. You started living there in 2003, but you're not. Although you're talking about something in the past, really your focus is on the present and how that thing from the past is affecting the present moment. Yeah. That's what the perfect tense is all about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump ahead here. We're talking about the perfect tense, and Susanta's next question is also about the perfect. But Lolly just asked a question, which is also specifically about the I have lived here. The question is, what's the difference when I say I've lived here for 10 years and I've been living here for 10 years? So both of these, again, these are the difference between the present perfect and the present perfect continuous. I have lived for 10 years, or I have been living for 10 years. So again, this is that idea that because we're talking about a period of time, it might be from 2003 until today, or it might be the past 10 years, but we're talking about the effect on the present. The fact that as of now, I am a 10-year veteran, or I have all of the experiences since 2003 of living here. The time includes now, so we're using the present tense. But because we're talking about the effect and the action, the effect on now, but all the action is in the past. That 10 years is all behind us. All the time since 2003 is in the past. We use the perfect to show that the action is in the past, but I'm talking about how that affects now. So then why would we use the continuous? Why would we say, for instance, it has been raining instead of it has rained all morning? Or why do we say I have been living here 10 years instead of I have lived here 10 years? And the key idea here is it comes down to what a perfect means and what a continuous means. Perfect emphasizes kind of the result or the accomplishment that something has been finished. So by saying I have lived here 10 years, you're saying, I've met this milestone, this 10 years thing. Like it's all past, it's completed. I made it 10 years. But when you use a continuous, like it was raining, you're talking about the fact that something is ongoing. It's not finished yet. So when you combine these, you want to emphasize both. You want to emphasize I've completed this, but it's not done yet.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. So when you say I have been doing something, or that means it has been going on all this time, but it's still ongoing. So when you say it has been raining all morning, you're saying it was raining, it rained for a while, it rained all morning, and it's still raining now. So that's like the difference in between past or present perfect and present perfect continuous is whether you only want to emphasize the effect and that something is completed, or if you also want to emphasize that it's ongoing.
Yeah. So in this context especially, that is a very sort of small, very subtle difference.
It is.
Yes. So and in a lot of ways you could just use the two interchangeably.
They are most of the time interchangeable. It's about subtle differences of emphasis.
Yes.
That's all it is, really.
Yes. Yeah. If you're emphasizing the achievement that 10 years is a long time, then perfect continuous would be better, and whereas present perfect, I have lived here for 10 years. If it's just matter of fact, and just you're just saying it. Great. Yeah. Let's see. So, should we go back to what Suzanne's comments?
Yes,
what
absolutely.
Do you say?
So we're still talking about the present perfect, or present perfect continuous, rather. I will be using your guitar until I get a new one, or I will have been using your guitar until I get a new one. Well, I guess this is the future perfect, isn't it?
I will be, or I will have been using your guitar until I get a new one. I will be using your guitar.
So I will be using your guitar is future continuous. You're saying it's in the future and it's going to be happening for a while without a specific end. Whereas you say I will have been, then you're talking about some moment in the future, and at that moment you're talking about an accomplishment, something that's been ongoing for a while. Now, in this particular case, the answer is kind of easy, like not analyzing the grammar. Like, it's just much more common to say I will be using than I will have been using. So that would be the right thing to say, most likely. Would you agree?
Well, I think I will be using your guitar until I get a new one is, you're saying that in the future that will be in progress still. Whereas I will have been using it, then you're not just saying that it at that time in the future it will be in progress. You're emphasizing the time
it'll continue.
The time that it has been continuous up until then.
Yes.
So again, a subtle difference, but it just depends what you want to emphasize. Whether you want to emphasize the length of time or merely the fact that it will be in progress at that point in the future. Yeah. So great question. It's a subtle difference. Great. So let's see.
Susanta has more questions.
We've got lots of tips coming. So if you have given us a tip, and we're not ignoring them. We're just going to come back to them. I think
we'll read all the tips and discuss them together.
Yeah. So
keep them coming.
Keep them coming. So here's one. Anonymous says, what about the difference between would and used to in the past? Like, I would love to go biking when I was a child, or I used to love biking when I was a child. So, I guess, I mean, when you use, in these, when I listen to those two examples, when you say I used to love biking, then you are sort of saying that now you don't.
Right.
I used to, but I don't now. Whereas when you say I would love to go biking, you're just emphasizing what you were like when you were a child. You're not really saying anything about now.
It may not have changed.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the difference. Would implies that when I said I would go to the grocery store, with my brother, like you're talking about something that happens every so often. Whereas used to, you're talking about something that was true and is not true anymore.
Which you are with would as well. But you're just emphasizing that it happened in the past, not without any statement about the fact that it stopped.
Yeah, you're not saying that it isn't true now.
Yeah.
Right. You're saying that it was true, but you're not saying that it's not anymore.
Yeah.
It could be not anymore, or it could still be happening, but you're not specifically saying. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Armin asks, is it correct to say he or she for animals? Or I assume the question is like, or should you always say it? And honestly, in English, this is pretty relaxed. If you specifically know that the animal is male or female, you can say he or she. But oftentimes you can just refer to an animal, especially a cute pet of some sort, as a he or a she, and nobody will be bothered by it. We don't have a specific rule in English that animals have to be referred to as it. In fact, some people might get upset if you call their little pet an it.
It,
So we quite commonly use he and she to refer to animals. Yes.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Mudassir Khan says, "How can I congratulate congratulate and appreciate my daughter who has just sent me her PPE (personal protection equipment) training certificate?" So, what's a good way to congratulate someone in English?
Something like "great job."
Yeah, well done.
Yes, well done.
That's awesome.
If it's if it's your daughter, you can definitely say, "I'm so proud of you."
That's
right?
a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't always say that just casually. That's something you generally say to like someone you're very close to, a family member or a very good friend.
Yeah.
But whereas the other one's "great job," "that's awesome," even things as simple as like "super" or "fantastic," like those all work very informally. They're good. Yeah.
So, Anonymous says, would it sound okay if I say, "No sooner had I stepped out of the house when it rained," or as soon as I stepped out of the house it rained? So
the second one is obviously okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that one. Yeah. As soon as I stepped out of the house, it rained. Though we might say instead of "it rained," what you're focusing on the fact that it started raining. So the main verb you really want to use is start or begin. So as soon as I stepped out of the house, it began to rain, or it started raining. Would probably be get your point across more that like it started as soon as you stepped out. Like it wasn't raining. You're like, okay, I'll go outside, and then bam, it starts raining.
But it's okay as it is. You could say, "As soon as I stepped out of the house, it rained."
Yes, that's totally okay, but just to get your point across, more likely you would say it began raining or it started raining.
Yeah.
Now the second one, or the first one rather.
Yeah.
This one might be something that's a little bit more particular. I would say, "No sooner had I stepped out of the house than it rained."
I think it depends on the context.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no sooner had I stepped out of the house when it rained. Yeah.
This is definitely something you hear, but I'm not sure that it's actually correct. I think that you should use "than." No sooner than is the idea. So no sooner did I
yeah,
did
but
I step
also
out,
you could say,
then it started raining.
If you were to start the sentence with, "It was no sooner than I stepped out of the house when it rained," then that makes more sense. You're sort of saying, that it rained.
Could be. I don't think I've heard that. But
yeah,
the phrase is certainly "no sooner than." That's the idiom, "no sooner than," and so that's the primary way to use that phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no sooner than.
But not necessarily the only. Yeah.
And that's what Susanna says. Yeah, she's saying "no sooner" requires "than."
Yes.
Yeah, because that is the full idiom. No sooner had I. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. Suzanne. Anonymous says, "What about the difference between beneath and underneath and below?" Beneath, underneath, and below. Prepositions. Lovely.
Prepositions are.
Prepositions. Well, you have to get this mug. We've got a preposition all about a mug all about prepositions, which you should be able to see in your in the chat. I'll see if I can get that to come up. I think I can do something here. But yeah, so prepositions are a pain, are difficult. And these are all very similar. Beneath, underneath, and below. Go on.
In English, in many languages, we have this idea of what are called collocations, which are just words that go together.
Yeah.
And so the difference between beneath and underneath and below are, to me, not so much about what they mean, though below is a little bit different, but kind of in the different situations where you use them, because they all mean this pretty much the same thing. Though beneath and underneath generally mean like right underneath, whereas below could mean as far, because we're all, and sometimes the others mean that as well, but it's a lot more kind of subtle touch. So it's really hard to talk about prepositions by themselves and say, this is
Yeah.
when you use this preposition. You can't really do it. What you do is you talk about the different situations and you say, this is the preposition you would use in this situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's really hard to, to
Yeah.
get into this. We need to explain lots of different contexts, but yeah, as a general rule, I said beneath and underneath are very similar, but below is a little bit different. Below, well, no, they all need to reference another object. This
Right.
this hand is beneath this hand. This hand is beneath this hand. One thing is beneath another, or one thing is underneath another thing, or one thing is below another thing.
So this one, the particular reason these are so weird is because of this kind of hodgepodge history of English, that below and under mean the same thing, but from two different sources in English.
Okay.
And so you get below and under that both come into English from different languages, different earlier languages, and they mean the same thing. So beneath means below-neath, whereas underneath is underneath. So beneath is just shortened for below-neath. Right. So they're the two words mean the same thing.
So neath means level?
Neath means, yes, under the level of, yeah.
Yeah, the level of, yeah.
And so these two words function, like in terms of like their history, they mean the same thing. But English doesn't just do that. There's no such thing as like two words meaning exactly the same thing. They are used in different ways. They have different collocations, different verbs that go with them, or different situations that they like to use. And so over time, these things, kind of collect different usages. If you look up below and under in a dictionary, you'll see maybe dozens or maybe a dozen or so different meanings, different uses, and some of them will be the same and some of them won't be, because over time these two words that came from different languages into English, both starting off meaning the same thing, have slowly taken on different nuances over time. And it's just an illustration of how flexible and how pliable and artistic English is, which can be really good, especially if you're a poet, but just make it a little bit more challenging to answer a simple question like, what's the difference between beneath and underneath?
Yeah. So Suzanne's is asking about the mug and asking if she can get one. So it's a merchandise that is available through the YouTube's own system. So you should see below the video. Do you see it there, Tony? You should be.
Let's see. Where is it? I usually see it. I don't see it at the moment. No.
Yeah, it's weird. Normally, if you watch any of my videos, you should sometimes see the three. We've got 3 mugs available in the system. They're made to order. So when somebody orders it, they print it and send it out. It's done by a separate company. So I'm not sure if it is available in every country. So it may be that you don't see it if it's not available in your country. But it's great. It's one of the ways that you can support the channel, because unfortunately it's not free. They do charge for it, but we make a little bit of money on it too. So yeah, if you want to support us, that's a great way to do it if you're able to. So let's see. There's a name here I can't pronounce, but they say, what is the difference between saying our life and our lives? Does it sound more natural to use plural form? Our experience or our experiences using determiners is always the difficult part. So
that's a good question.
Our life or our lives?
If you're talking about our, you're only going to use a singular if you're talking about something that only exists between the two of you. So if you're talking about, your partner, and you say our life together, you're talking about specifically the time of your lives that you've been together. So that's you're talking about that specific singular thing, the thing that you share. But if you're talking about any other aspect, you would say our lives, plural. Same for experiences. So like you could say, remember our experience at, when we went to visit this place. You're talking about one specific experience that you shared. Otherwise, you have to talk about your experiences. If you're just talking about singular, experience or experiences is a little bit more maybe challenging, because you could say my experience, but you can also talk about my experiences, and that's a little bit more subtle. But for our, it's very simple. If you're talking about one specific thing that's shared, you use the singular. Otherwise, the plural.
Yeah. So Anonymous says the cooking will have been done by the time you came back home. Is that correct, sir? If so, what is the implication of that sentence? So the cooking will have been done by the time you come back. Okay, so will have been done. So we're getting into some really complex tenses here. This is great.
Yeah.
We haven't actually written this part of the course yet, but we are going.
Well, actually, this is yeah, no, that's true. We haven't. This one is the trick here is, though, that done is not a verb in this sentence. It might seem like it is, but it's not. It's an adjective, because if you put this sentence in present simple, that is, the cooking is done. So the cooking is finished. Like you're using that as just to describe the state of the cooking, right? So this is let's break this down.
But hang on, but isn't it a bit of a grey area? Because you could describe it in that way, because you can say, you can use the verb to be to describe something with an adjective. So you can say, it is done. But then you can also use the verb to be to make the passive voice. So couldn't this also be passive? Like, the cooking is done. Somebody did the cooking. I think the two things kind of. It's not often you'll see Tony looking confused.
In this case. I know what you mean, but I don't think it is. I think that this is just a future perfect continuous, or sorry, just a future perfect.
I think it's both.
But
I think it's both. I think it's a sort of. I think the two areas overlap, and this is one situation, one context where both apply or could apply equally. But yeah, so the cooking will have been done by the time you come back. So what we're saying here is, when you get home, at that point in time, so it's a future. And that's why we're using the auxiliary verb will. The cooking will have been done by the time you come home. So will makes it future, have makes it perfect. So we're saying.
So we're talking about the result.
Yes, the result. So the result at that future time of something that happened before it, is that the cooking will be done. The cooking will be finished, or someone will have cooked. So what you're saying is the cooking's not done now, but at that time in the future, it will have been done before that. So at some point before that, it will be done. That's what you're saying. I hope that makes sense. You're saying that it's not done now. You're not saying specifically exactly when it will be done, but it will be done at some point before you get home. You arrive home. Does that hope that makes sense? So let's see. And he goes on to say, sir, do you offer private online classes? If so, what is the rate? I'm from the Philippines, would love to enroll in your class. So I do a little bit, but it's not what I focus on. So I'm focusing on writing this course, and once that's done, I want to be making more videos. That's what I'm more passionate about. I do have one student who I have regular classes with, and one other one that I might be starting with soon. But it's not something I'm actively looking for to do more. But what about you, Tony? Are you in the market for classes?
Maybe sometime in the near future, not right away, but maybe sometime in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah. So if anything changes on that front, and we do offer classes, the best thing to do is to go to the website, sign up to the mailing list.
Yes.
And keep checking these live streams, because if anything changes and we do offer anything like that, it's through the mailing list, and here we'll mention it. Also on Instagram and Twitter, follow us in all those places. You'll that's where you'll find out about it if anything changes, and on the website if you check it out on the website. But like I said, at the moment, what we're focusing on is this course that we've been writing, Inside English. We've been making a lot of progress with that, although it's all writing. We haven't been putting much out there yet.
Not yet.
Not yet,
No.
but very soon we will.
Spec stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I want to make more videos about more grammar videos as well, that tie in with the course, which will be free to watch. So that's what we're focusing on right now. So
shall we go back and share everyone's tips?
Yes,
that
I think
shared?
that's a good
Learning
idea.
English?
Yeah.
Lolly had our first tip, and they said they write down notes in their notebook, and that's always very good. It's always useful to keep notes. Writing something down is a different language processing part of your brain than saying it or listening to it, and so it helps reinforce anything that you've learned by writing it down. It's always a good tip. Something we don't necessarily take the time to do sometimes when we're using computers.
Yeah. I'm not a very good note taker. I hardly ever write things by hand anymore, and to the point that when I do, my hand almost aches. Because I'm not accustomed to using my hands to write anymore, because I type so much. So I think it's
true.
If you are studying something, it is good to write things by hand.
It is. Not everyone can. I've always had joint pain, so I've always had it pains me to write, even since I was young. But I used to do it all the time, even though it hurt, because it was useful. But yeah, not everyone can do this, but if you can, it's a really useful tip. Pablo says they found that using any learned vocabulary or structure with friends talking or on a phone call helps a lot to remember what was taught in class. And that's a really good point. If you don't practice what you learn, learning it is not much use. You can practice things by saying it to yourself or repeating things or writing things down, but the best way to practice something is to speak to someone else in English. Always try to learn your new vocabulary, the new structures, the new tenses that you learned when you're talking to anybody else. That's probably one of the most important tips for learning any language, really.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, totally.
Now, one thing that I will add to this is it's incredibly valuable, if you can, to try to practice these things talking to an English speaker, especially a native speaker or someone who really knows the language, and tell them always correct me if I make a mistake. And that's really useful. And not everyone can do this. Like, there's not always a native English speaker around. But it's really valuable if you can find someone. Depending on where you are in the world, there might be expat Americans or Brits or Australians or other people that you can that might be interested in learning your language, and you can find and kind of buddy up with them and help them learn your language, or help them learn help them find all the good local food in exchange for getting to practice.
Try to meet tourists.
English teachers. Say again?
Try to meet tourists.
Yeah, absolutely. Because don't necessarily look for these people and say, can you teach me English? That's not the goal. The goal is just to find people that you can talk to and practice your English, and tell them, if I make a mistake, you can correct me. These people won't be professional teachers, but that's still one of the best ways to practice your English.
It's a really good point, though, about saying, tell them to correct you, because I know from talking to people, people who've not been teachers, I think, their natural tendency is to, if they understand, even if you've made mistakes, if they understand, they will just carry on as if you didn't make a mistake. That's the sort of natural tendency, and they'll feel shy or reluctant to correct you because they think that you might get offended if they correct you. So you do, and I know that that's wrong because I work with a lot of and I talk to and I meet a lot of people who have English as a second language, and because I've worked as a teacher, I know that people do appreciate it when you correct them, as long as you do it in the right context. So, but not everyone knows that. Not every native English speaker that you meet will know that. So it is worth asking for correction, because you won't necessarily get it, and then that might make you think you're not making your English is right, or something is right when actually you're making a mistake. And I do think that people, perhaps who've lived in the UK or in the United States for a long time, but English is not their first language, they do end up getting mistakes or making mistakes that they don't know are mistakes because no one corrects them. Yeah. So they become deeply rooted. Yes,
and that is a problem. And that's the weakness of practicing your English without a native speaker. Because if you're both making the same mistakes, you might just practice making mistakes. Your practice might actually wind up being wrong. Now, of course, it's still better than not practicing at all, because not everyone's going to have access to a native speaker. But when you can find native speakers to talk to, it's always worthwhile to do that. That's definitely going to be the best practice you can get.
Yeah.
Okay. Mudasir Khan has more of a request, but I'm going to list it with the advice because I think it kind of secondhand is good advice. They're asking, I would like you to make videos to teach us the names of things used in daily life, like vegetables, dried fruits, spices, market vocabulary, etc. And so first of all, I'll say we would love to be able to spend more time making just short videos, maybe on Instagram for just pronouncing words.
I do plan to do that.
We are going to be doing.
I had those from last week. We looked at those medical terms, and the plan was that I was going to put them on Instagram. I didn't get around to doing that yet, unfortunately, but that is the plan. And doing more vocabulary videos on Instagram I think that's the right place for it, because they can be very short. So that's definitely something we want to do. And Colin, you said, unfortunately, I'm not even sure it's unfortunate, because it means we're really focusing on being able to finally get the Inside English course out to you guys so you can start learning from it. So that's good. That's a priority. But yes, we definitely want to do more of these, and we will be doing these in the future. But there are lots of videos like this that are already out there. They may not be exactly the list of words you would choose, but listening to videos that actually talk about pronunciation. Obviously, we already have a lot of really good videos on how to pronounce the sounds of English that Colin has been working on for years. They're really good. So this is a good tip. And obviously this is something that you guys are already doing because you're here on the channel. So that's a good tip. Yeah. They have their other tip, Mudasir Khan was saying, is reading English books out loud and to shadow a native speaker to solve a pronunciation problem, or reading novels and newspapers and solving vocabulary problems. And those are all really good tips. Reading out loud and shadowing, or trying to mimic a native speaker. As you're listening to them, try to pronounce the words the same way they do. Because pronunciation is physical. If you're not saying the words out loud, you're not you're not practicing your pronunciation. Yeah, exactly. So it's like what I said about, pronunciation is physical. So saying the words out loud, you're actually exercising those the production of those sounds that you may not be accustomed to. So you're exercising the way that you pronounce them. So your pronunciation will get better. Another thing that I found when learning Spanish was that sort of memorizing certain sort of conversations that I knew I would have on a regular basis, with different people, like talking about who I am, where I'm from, what I'm doing, who my family are, so things like that. So I sort of had certain scripts kind of memorized, and that helped with fluency. Because you can actually just get talking because you know what you're saying. But then over time, I was able to. They were able to evolve and change, and as I had that sort of similar conversation with different people, different people would ask different questions and they'd go off on different angles. So I found that helpful. Just and then also what I learned in kind of writing that script that I knew I would say, I was able to use in other ways as well. So there's a concept called the elevator pitch, where it's like, if you were in an elevator with somebody, they can't get away from you, and you want to try to convince them of something, you want to try to sell them something or get them to invest in your idea. You've got 30 seconds or 90 seconds with this person. What would you say? So writing some elevator pitches is I think a really good idea. What is it? Who write about yourself, but in a way that you can say in a very short amount of time, 1 minute, say. So because if you write that, you will use it. You will end up using it. You may not use it exactly as you write it, but you will use bits of it, and then what you learn from writing it, you can use in other things as well. So great.
I think the last tip that I've been able to find in the list is from Aravind, and they say by reading novels, it's helpful to improve my skills, and that's true. One of the things that one of the mistakes that some people make when they're learning a language is the only thing they read are books about how to learn that language. And while those are very useful, they're not always interesting and making you want to keep reading.
Yeah.
Really, the best way to really get excited and really make progress is to find something you like reading or you like listening to. I've known a lot of people who learned English because they liked listening to music, and so they liked being able to listen to the songs, and they worked really hard to learn the language so that they could listen to the songs, and the more they listened to the songs, the more English they learned. Or because people that like to read books, and so they enjoy reading books in another language, and it helps them stay excited about learning because they want to be able to keep reading. So those are very good tips as well.
Yeah. So also movies and TV shows, music.
Absolutely.
You can get all of those things with subtitles, or you can look up, if it's a song, you can sort of look up the lyrics and learn what it means. Those are all really good and very common tips. So Lut says more tips about tenses, please. So that leads nicely into the 3 tips, or the tips that we have, that are that the course we're writing, Inside English, is sort of based on. So Inside English is about it's based on grammar, and it's focusing on tenses. But it's more than just tenses, because really tense is so important. It's how everything, how the structure of English is all based on tense. Really, every sentence is in a tense, and it's something that people do make a lot of mistakes on. Even people who perhaps have lived in the UK for a long time, but English is a second language, that I still hear a lot of people making mistakes with tense. And it's not as simple as just sort of learning a new word or learning vocabulary. It is more complicated. But also there are things that make it complicated, that aren't necessarily really all about the main idea. So we've narrowed it down to 3 things. There are 3 things to really help you understand tense. The first thing is structures. There are 3 main structures. A sentence can be either positive, negative, or a question. And so I could say, let me think. I walk to work. That's a positive sentence. Or I could say I don't, or I do not walk to work. Or that's negative. Or a question: do I walk to work? And all we're doing is, we add the word not to make it negative, and then we change the order of the auxiliary verb and the subject to make a question. And those changes, those three structures, are the same for every tense and every verb, whether they're regular, irregular, or anything. So those are really important, because people think, oh, tense is difficult, there's so many irregular verbs and things like that. Yes, that's true, but that doesn't apply to these three main structures. They are very logical, and so what we're kind of saying in Inside English is all these things that confuse people and make things seem complicated. Put them to one side. Let's focus on what isn't confusing. Let's focus on what is logical. Sometimes it's complicated, but it is logical. So that's what Inside English is all about. Because I feel like when I've taught English in schools and or in language institutes, and I've gone through textbooks, the way that it's structured, it always, it might start with the present simple tense, for example, because that's the most common. But in a lot of ways, it's very difficult to learn, because it doesn't use the auxiliary verb. Sometimes you drop the auxiliary verb. You've got when it's third person, you have an S, and all these little things that make it complicated. So anyway, tip number one. Structure. Those three structures: positive, negative, question. Think about them and know that they are logical. They are consistent. They are your friend.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about tip number two?
So tip number two is about each individual tense. There's so many tenses, and so learning all the tenses: past perfect, present continuous, future perfect continuous, present simple. Like there's
difficult
a lot
to
of
remember
tenses,
them
there's
all,
a lot to understand. But the better way to look at it, like each tense word, each tense name has two words in it: present simple, past perfect, future continuous. And the reason for that is that tense is actually not a single thing. It's made up of two parts. The first part is what we call the time of action, which isn't when the action happened, it's when you're talking about. And that's simple. It's past, present, or future. You can either be talking about a time in the past, you can be talking about right now, that's the present, or you can be talking about some time in the future. Mm-hmm. And then what completes the idea of tense is the type of action. So we've got time of action is past, present, future, and type of action, which kind of tells you a little bit more about the action, like when it happened, relative to the time you're talking about, or whether you're talking about an action that's ongoing, or you're talking about a result. And that's simple, continuous, or perfect. Continuous tense means you're talking about something that's ongoing. A perfect tense means you're talking about something that's finished, or something that you're talking about the result of it. And then the key idea here is that simple, it doesn't say anything particular. It just means you're not saying it's continuous or perfect. You're just leaving out that information. And so this gives you kind of a grid. You've got past simple, past perfect, past continuous, all the way up to future simple, future perfect, and to future continuous. And those the types of actions can combine. So you can also have something that is, say, present perfect continuous. It can be both perfect and continuous. So this, instead of having to learn 9 or 12 different tenses, you just have to learn 3 different times of action and 3 different types of action, and they form a grid that covers all the different possible tenses, and it makes you understand what they mean relative to each other and how they connect.
Yeah. So just remember that those 9 main tenses are a combination of either past, present, future, and then also simple, continuous, and perfect. And then the extra 3 tenses, which the more advanced ones, can be both perfect and continuous, and that's it.
There's still combinations of those two, those two different types. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and then the third one.
Yeah, and then the third one. So people often talk about irregular verbs and the verb forms and things like that, because in other languages, those are where you sort of get the tense from what the form of the verb. Now, although but and in English it's different. Although the form of the verb does change, it's really the auxiliary verb is what is much more important in forming tense. If you look at an auxiliary, all you need to know what tense a sentence is in is the auxiliary verb. If you can, if you know the auxiliary verb, you can figure out what tense it is. Whereas if you know the form of the verb, you don't necessarily. So if you say, "I am walking," the word "walking" it could be any continuous tense. It could also be, if you say, "I like walking," that's not a continuous tense. That's using the ing form as a gerund, so it's not continuous. The main verb in that sentence is like, and then also you might say the cake is cooked, or then you're using the passive voice. So it's not again the form of the verb is confusing there. But really, the auxiliary verb is what is most important to focus on when you're trying to understand and use tense correctly. So those are our three tips. Think about, know that the structures are consistent. Positive, negative, question. When trying to remember the tenses, don't think about all the different tenses. There's 12. Just think of the time and aspect. And then number 3, remember how important auxiliary verbs are.
And we really feel that these three things, they're fairly simple, but they just wipe away a lot of the complicated extra layers of tense. And tense really can make sense. It really can follow some simple rules if you follow these 3 tips. Obviously there's still little complications here and there, but really understanding how tense works is as simple as these three core ideas.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think we've run on a little bit more than the hour, which is great. Time always flies by when we have these sessions.
We had great questions.
But great questions, great tips. So thank you all so much for taking part today. And I really hope that you will join us next week. And why not tell your friends about it? If you're in an English class or something, or you've got a teacher, let them know about the course, about the classes. We do it every Tuesday at 2:00 UK time, so the same time as this. So let your friends know, let your teachers know. And give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. We've got 16 likes so far. That's pretty good. We always like to aim for 20, so if we can get 4 more, that would be nice. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again next week.